Cole Dawson reined his horse at the edge of town, the iron-gray sky pressing low like a threat. Late winter clung to everything: frozen mud, bare trees, wind sharp enough to cut. His saddlebags hung heavy with supplies from the feed store. Flour and salt and coffee beans enough to last a month. He never meant to look through the slats of that leaning shack. But movement caught his eye. Something in the way the lamplight flickered through the warped boards. Cole pulled his horse to a stop, breath clouding white in the cold air. Through the gap between planks, he saw her. Ruth Winslow knelt on the floor. 3 children gathered close around a table made from crates. She wore a faded dress, sleeves rolled despite the cold, dark hair pulled back in a bun coming loose at the edges. On a chipped tin plate before her lay potato peelings, bread heels hard as stone, bacon grease scraped thin from a pan. She divided these scraps with a mother's precise hands. The oldest child, a girl maybe 8 years old, watched with solemn eyes. A boy of 6 sat cross-legged, hands folded in his lap. The youngest, barely 4, swung his feet and smiled like this was Christmas morning. Ruth portioned out the peelings, 3 small piles. She broke the bread heels into pieces, arranging them beside the scraps. The bacon grease she spread with her finger, making it reach as far as it would go. "There now," she said, voice bright as summer though her hands trembled. "A fine supper for my fine children." The girl touched her mother's sleeve. "Mama, aren't you eating? I had plenty earlier." "Sweet girl, this is all for you." Cole's throat closed like a fist. He knew hunger had known it as a boy before his mother's rough hands and his own grit built what became the Dawson Ranch, but he'd forgotten its face until this moment. The way it made mothers smile while dividing nothing into portions for 3, the way children accepted scraps without complaint because they trusted the woman who served them. His saddlebags hung heavy with abundance. Her cupboard stood bare as bone. Cole backed his horse away slow, heart hammering against his ribs. The children's voices drifted through the cold air, thanking their mother for the feast she'd made from garbage. Ruth's laugh followed, warm and genuine. The sound of a woman refusing to let poverty steal her children's joy. He rode toward his ranch as the sun set blood orange behind the hills. The land stretched wide around him, 300 acres of prime grazing, barns full of cattle, a house with more rooms than one man needed. He'd built it all from nothing, proved every doubter wrong, succeeded beyond his boyhood dreams. But tonight the emptiness of it struck him like a physical blow. The weight of what he'd seen felt heavier than any saddle he'd ever carried. Cole stared at the dinner table, unable to lift his fork. His housekeeper, Mrs. Porter, had set out roasted chicken with potatoes and carrots, fresh bread still warm from the oven, preserved peaches glistening in a china bowl. Steam rose from the dishes, filling the dining room with smells that should have made his mouth water. All he saw was Ruth Winslow dividing scraps. "Mr. Dawson." Mrs. Porter stood in the doorway, concern creasing her weathered face. "The chicken not to your liking?" "It's fine." Cole pushed his plate away. "I'm not hungry tonight." She didn't argue, just gathered the dishes with the quiet efficiency of a woman who'd kept house for him 5 years and learned when silence served better than questions. When she left, Cole sat alone in the too large room, lamplight throwing shadows across walls that never heard children's laughter. He made his inquiries careful the next morning. The mercantile owner, Jim Brennan, sorted nails into bins while they talked. "Ruth Winslow keeps to herself mostly. Husband died near 2 years back, lumber accident up north. Terrible thing. She moved here after. Thought a fresh start might help. Family nearby. None that I know of." Jim measured out 10-penny nails, metal clinking into the scale. "She comes in sometimes for day-old bread. Pays what she can. Proud woman. That one. Won't accept charity." At the general store, Mrs. Hawkins leaned across the counter, voice dropping to a whisper. "Too proud for her own good, if you ask me. The church ladies tried to help, took her a basket last Christmas. She thanked them polite but said she was managing fine." The older woman sniffed. "Managing on scraps and stubbornness, more like..." Cole bought coffee he didn't need and left before his questions drew more attention. That night he couldn't sleep. He paced his study while wind rattled the windows, remembering things he'd tried to forget. His mother's hands, red and cracked from washing other people's laundry so he could eat. The winter they'd had nothing, absolutely nothing, and he'd watched her face when she thought he wasn't looking. The quiet desperation she hid behind smiles. Then one morning, a sack of flour appeared on their porch. No note. No name. Just 50 pounds of flour that kept them alive until spring work came and his mother found steady employment. He never learned who left it, but he learned what it meant. That sometimes mercy came from strangers. That goodness didn't require recognition. That one person's quiet kindness could save a family from the edge of ruin. Cole stopped pacing. Through the window, stars burned cold and distant above his prosperous land. If he could help without shaming her, without binding her with obligation or debt, he would. Before dawn, Cole rose with resolution hardening like frost in his chest. Cole filled the largest wicker basket he owned. Eggs packed in straw, careful so none would crack. A 10-pound sack of flour, bacon wrapped in butcher paper, thick slices from Brennan's best stock, potatoes, 6 good ones without eyes or soft spots, 2 cans of milk, dried apples, a small sack of sugar that cost more than it should but would let those children taste sweetness. He wrapped everything in clean cloth, tied it with twine, left no note that might make her feel beholden. The sky was still black when he saddled his horse. Stars faded at the edges. Dawn an hour away. His breath clouded white in the cold air as he rode toward town. The basket secured behind his saddle. No one stirred on the streets. Shops stood dark, windows reflecting nothing. Cole guided his horse through alleys he'd never taken before, approaching Ruth's shack from the back where fewer eyes might see. Her chimney showed no smoke yet. She'd be sleeping still, conserving firewood, stretching every stick of wood like she stretched every scrap of food. The thought tightened something in Cole's chest. He dismounted quiet, boots crunching on frozen ground. The basket felt lighter than it should, though it held more food than he'd eat in 3 days. He placed it on her doorstep, adjusting the cloth so wind wouldn't disturb it. His hands shook slightly, though whether from cold or something else he couldn't say. For a moment he stood there, imagining her opening the door to find abundance waiting. The shock on her face, maybe tears, gathering the children to show them. Their wonder at eggs and flour and sugar they hadn't tasted in months. The relief of a mother who could feed her children something more than garbage today. He retreated before light broke the horizon, back at his ranch. Cole unsaddled his horse and stood in the barn as dawn painted the sky gold and pink. The empty stalls, the silent house, the land stretching away in all directions. He'd built an empire, but filled it with nothing that mattered. Maybe helping her family would fill something in him too. He made a decision standing there in the growing light. This wouldn't be a single act of charity to soothe his conscience. Tomorrow he'd bring another basket. And the next day, and the next. He'd keep bringing them until she no longer needed him to. Until those children grew round-cheeked and strong. Until Ruth Winslow could divide plenty instead of scraps. The thought settled into his bones like purpose. Cole walked toward his house as the sun cleared the hills, warming the frozen land. For the first time in years, maybe since he'd finished building this ranch, he felt like the work he'd do today actually mattered. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that gave shape to Cole's mornings. He woke before dawn, filled the basket while coffee brewed, rode different routes each day so no one would track the pattern. Sometimes he approached from the north, other times from the east, once cutting through the creek bed where cottonwoods screened the path. He left the basket before light broke, before Ruth woke, before the town stirred. The basket always came back empty. She left it on her doorstep, cleaned and folded, ready for the next delivery. The wicker gleamed like she'd scrubbed it. The cloth came back pressed flat, creases sharp as if she'd ironed it, though he doubted she owned an iron. Small signs of gratitude appeared. A wildflower tucked in the handle one morning. Purple petals bright against brown wicker, even though it was barely spring and flowers shouldn't bloom yet. She'd searched the creek banks, found something growing against the odds. left it as wordless thanks. Cole pressed it between pages of his Bible. A fragile gift from a woman he'd never properly spoken to. He varied what he brought. Essentials always eggs, flour, bacon, milk. But other things too. A jar of honey golden as sunlight, a tin of tea that smelled of distant places. Once, late at night when he couldn't sleep, he carved a small wooden horse for the youngest child, sanded it smooth, left it nestled among the potatoes. Sunday mornings he saw her at church. Ruth sat in the back pew, children scrubbed and neat despite threadbare clothes. She held her head high, accepted no pity, sang hymns in a voice clear as creek water. When their eyes met across the congregation, something passed between them. She didn't know it was him leaving the baskets, but she was praying for her unknown benefactor. He could see it in the way her lips moved during silent prayer, the way her hand pressed to her heart. Cole found himself arriving at church early just to watch her walk in. His housekeeper noticed the change in him. "You've been cheerful lately, Mr. Dawson," Mrs. Porter said while serving breakfast one Thursday. "Whistling while you work. Haven't heard that since I don't know when." "Spring coming," Cole said, which was true but not the whole truth. Spring was coming. The ritual of preparing baskets gave it meaning. One morning in the third week, he found a note tucked in the returned basket. The paper was rough, probably torn from an old book. The pencil letters careful and precise. "To my unknown friend, you have saved us. There are no words sufficient for such kindness. May God bless your generous heart and return to you tenfold what you have given. Your grateful recipient." Cole stood in his barn, early light slanting through gaps in the boards, and read the note 3 times. His throat felt tight. He folded it careful, slipped it into his coat pocket where it rested against his heart like a talisman. That evening he carved another toy, a small wooden bird this time. He sanded it until the grain shone, imagined small hands holding it. A child's wonder at receiving something made just for them. The baskets had started as duty, penance for the accident of his abundance beside her poverty. But somewhere between the first delivery and this morning's note, the feeling had shifted into something warmer. He thought about her more than he should, wondered what made her laugh, wanted to know the sound of her voice saying his name. He was falling in love with a woman he'd never properly spoken to, and the thought terrified him. The first real signs of spring arrived in early March. Snow melted at the edges of things. Grass showed green beneath brown. The creek ran higher, ice breaking into chunks that tumbled downstream. Mornings still bit cold, but the wind had lost its killing edge. Birds returned, robins hopping across mud that would soon be earth again. Cole felt the thaw in more than weather. He started including books in the baskets. He'd noticed the oldest girl, Emma, at church, how her eyes followed the Reverend's Bible, lips moving slightly as if trying to read the words from 3 pews back. So he wrapped a primer in oilcloth, tucked it beneath the flower. A week later he added a reader with simple stories, then a book of poems. Because every child should know beauty alongside survival. Ruth responded with drawings, crude sketches on scraps of paper, clearly done by children's hands. A house with smoke curling from the chimney, flowers in impossible colors, a family of stick figures holding hands, 4 of them. The mother in the center with arms stretched wide enough to hold everyone. Cole kept every drawing in his desk drawer. One morning he arrived earlier than usual, sky still more black than gray. He just placed the basket when the door rattled. His heart jumped into his throat. He grabbed the basket, pulled it back, dove behind his wagon just as the door opened. Ruth stepped onto the threshold in a nightgown and shawl, barefoot despite the cold. She looked left, then right, squinting into the darkness. Cole held his breath, pressed against the wagon wheel, feeling ridiculous and exposed. She stood there a long moment, searching. Then she bent and lifted the basket he'd set down seconds before. He must have been louder than he thought. Her hands trembled as she pulled back the cloth. Even in the dim light he saw her face change, saw wonder and relief and something like grief all mixed together. She pressed her hand to her heart. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Cole watched her cry silent tears of gratitude over eggs and flour. Watched her shoulders shake with the weight of relief. Watched her gather the basket close like it was precious as gold. She wasn't charity anymore. Wasn't an abstract good deed. She was a woman who worked herself ragged to keep her children fed, who taught them their letters by lamplight, who made threadbare clothes look neat through sheer force of will. She was magnificent, and he wanted to know her. Ruth carried the basket inside, closing the door soft behind her. Cole stayed crouched behind his wagon until his legs cramped, making sure she wouldn't come back out. When he finally stood, the sky had lightened to gray, birds starting their morning songs. He rode home as the sun rose, and everything looked different. The fear he'd been holding that his help might shame her, that he was overstepping, that this was just duty burned away like morning fog. He wasn't helping anymore out of Christian obligation or childhood memory. Somewhere between the first basket and watching her cry grateful tears in her doorway, he'd fallen completely in love with Ruth Winslow. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing he'd let himself feel in years. That evening, he sat on his porch, watching the sunset, the note from her basket still in his pocket. Spring was coming, ice breaking, the world waking up from winter sleep. Maybe hearts could thaw too. Maybe a lonely rancher and a struggling widow could find warmth in each other. Maybe love grew best in the spaces between giving and receiving, in the silent language of baskets left and gratitude returned. Cole pulled out the note, read it again by fading light. May God bless your generous heart. He hoped God would forgive him for wanting more than blessing. He wanted her voice, her laughter, her hand in his. He wanted those children running through his empty halls. He wanted to build the family he'd never let himself imagine, with a woman who'd taught him that true wealth had nothing to do with land or cattle. But wanting and having were different countries, and the distance between them felt impossibly wide. The trouble started at Brennan's Mercantile on a Tuesday morning. Cole was buying supplies, more eggs than usual. Another sack of flour, though he'd bought one 3 days prior. Extra bacon. Dried fruit. Tea. He didn't notice Mrs. Brennan watching from behind the counter, eyes sharp as a hawk tracking prey. That's a lot for one man, Mr. Dawson, she said while tallying his purchases. You entertaining company? Just stocking up. Cole kept his voice casual. Never know when you might need extra. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course. By Thursday, the whispers had started. Cole heard them in fragments, pieces of conversation that stopped when he walked past. At the feed store, 2 ranch hands went quiet mid-sentence. At church on Sunday, Mrs. Hawkins and her sister huddled together, glancing his direction with expressions that mixed curiosity and judgment. The gossip reached his ears through his ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Dutch who'd worked for Cole since the beginning. They were mending fence when Dutch cleared his throat. Uncomfortable. Boss, I'm hearing talk in town. Thought you should know. Cole hammered a post straight. What kind of talk? The Brennan woman's been spreading stories. Says you're buying supplies no bachelor would need. Folks are speculating. Dutch spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Some figure you've taken up with a woman in secret. Others think, well, they think you're helping that Winslow widow. The hammer paused mid-swing. And what do they think about that? Divided opinions. Some call it charity. Others say it ain't proper. A wealthy bachelor leaving things for a young widow. You know how people talk. Cole drove the post with 3 hard strikes. Let them talk. But the talking didn't stop. It spread like fire in dry grass, touching everything. By the following week, even Reverend Hayes got involved. He found Cole after Sunday service, pulling him aside with the gentle firmness of a man used to delivering difficult truths. Mr. Dawson, I wonder if we might speak privately. They walked to the side of the church, away from the dispersing congregation. The Reverend folded his hands, choosing words carefully. I've heard certain rumors. I don't give them much credence, but appearances matter in a community like ours. If you're offering charity to Mrs. Winslow, perhaps it would be better handled through the church board. We have proper channels for such things. Proper channels. Cole kept his voice level. You mean committees that decide who deserves help and who doesn't? I mean appropriate oversight. A man of your standing, helping a young widow privately, it invites speculation. Surely you see how it might be misunderstood. Cole looked past the Reverend to where Ruth stood near her wagon, helping her children climb into the back. She moved with quiet dignity, back straight despite the weight of judgment she must feel pressing down. I appreciate your concern, Reverend, but I'll handle my affairs as I see fit. He walked away before the conversation could continue, but the Reverend's words followed him home. That afternoon, Ruth went to the general store for thread. She overheard Mrs. Hawkins talking to another woman near the fabric counter, voices pitched just loud enough to carry. That Dawson ranch owner has been buying strange supplies, eggs and flour and such. They say he's been leaving things for that Winslow woman. Well, the other woman's voice dripped with implication. We all know what that means. Ruth's face burned. She paid for her thread and left without looking at anyone, cheeks flaming with shame even though she'd done nothing wrong. That night, the basket didn't come. Ruth woke before dawn as she always did, stepped out to find the doorstep empty. She stood in the cold for a long moment, staring at the bare boards where abundance had appeared every morning for 6 weeks. Her unknown friend had abandoned her. She gathered her children close that day, divided the last of the flour into thin pancakes, told herself she'd managed before and would manage again. But something bright had been taken away, and the loss cut deeper than hunger. Cole sat in his study, the filled basket beside his desk, and couldn't make himself move. The town's judgment pressed down like a physical weight. He could stop now. Let the church board take over with their forms and questions and committees that made charity feel like punishment. He could save his reputation, preserve the standing he'd built through years of hard work. But he'd seen how the church ladies treated Ruth, kind but condescending, generous but judgmental, helping while making sure everyone knew who was helper and who needed help. He looked at the basket, at Ruth's last note still in his pocket, at the children's drawings in his desk drawer. The sun was setting when he finally made his decision. Cole didn't sleep. He paced his study until the floorboards creaked, arguing with himself in the dark. What would people say if he continued? What would they think? He'd built his reputation through years of honest work, fair dealing, respect earned through character. Did he throw that away for a woman he'd never properly spoken to? But then he imagined Ruth's face this morning, finding the doorstep empty for the first time in 6 weeks. Imagined her wondering what she'd done wrong. If her unknown benefactor had decided she wasn't worth the trouble anymore. Imagined those children going back to scraps and hunger because he was too cowardly to face gossip. His ranch foreman found him in the barn at dawn, saddling his horse with shaking hands. Boss, you all right? You look like hell. I'm fine. Cole cinched the saddle too tight, had to loosen it and start over. You ain't been yourself lately. If something's troubling you. I said I'm fine. Dutch. The words came out sharp as a slap. Dutch stepped back, hands raised. All right, boss. All right. Cole immediately regretted the outburst. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... He stopped, took a breath. I'm dealing with something. I'll figure it out. But he didn't figure it out. All morning he worked himself ragged, mending fence that didn't need mending, moving cattle that were fine where they were, anything to avoid the decision burning in his chest. That night he sat in his study, the basket filled and waiting, and pulled out Ruth's note one more time. You have saved us. May God bless your generous heart. Saved them. He remembered another note, decades old, that his mother had written but never sent. He'd found it after she died, tucked in her Bible. To whoever left the flower, it read, You saved my son's life. I will never forget your kindness. That nameless person had changed everything. Had kept a desperate widow and her child from starving, had taught a young Cole Dawson that mercy existed in the world, that goodness was real. that one person's quiet courage could save a family from ruin. Now he was that person, and he was failing. The town's opinion mattered less than a child's full belly. His reputation meant nothing compared to a mother's relief. And if he loved Ruth Winslow, he admitted it fully now. The truth he'd been circling for weeks, then he had to be brave enough to stand openly. Love demanded courage. Not the courage of fighting, but the harder courage of being seen, of risking judgment, of choosing what was right even when the cost was high. Cole stood, grabbed the basket, and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. But this time he didn't take the back alleys or hidden routes. He rode straight down Main Street as the sky lightened to gray. The basket visible to anyone looking out their window. Let them see. Let them whisper. Let them judge. He was done hiding kindness like it was something shameful. When he reached Ruth's shack, neighbors were already stirring. Mrs. Hawkins stood on her porch 2 houses down, watching. Old man Peterson paused while feeding his chickens. Cole felt their eyes like brands, but he didn't turn away. He dismounted, walked to Ruth's door, and knocked. Long silence. Then footsteps. The door opened slow. Ruth stood there in her faded dress, dark hair loose around her shoulders, eyes red like she'd been crying. 3 children peered from behind her skirts, faces thin but hopeful. Their eyes met. Cole watched recognition dawn slowly. Then all at once. Her hand flew to her mouth. "It was you," she whispered. He nodded, throat too tight for words. Then he found his voice. "It was me." "May I come in?" Ruth stepped back, door opening wider. The children scattered like birds, watching from behind furniture with curious eyes. Cole entered, hat in hands, the basket still on his arm. The shack was smaller inside than it looked from outside. One room with a cooking area, a table made from crates, a curtained corner where Ruth probably slept. The children's bedding lay rolled in another corner. Everything was clean, scrubbed, organized with the fierce tidiness of someone who had little but cared for it well. Ruth gestured to the table. "Please, sit." They sat across from each other, the basket between them like a bridge. "I saw you," Cole started, words coming rough. "6 weeks ago, through the slats. You were dividing scraps for your children." He swallowed hard. "I couldn't forget it. Couldn't unsee it. So I started bringing baskets." Tears slipped down Ruth's cheeks. "You saved us. I didn't know how much longer I could—" Her voice broke. "You don't have to explain." Cole reached across the table, stopped himself before touching her hand. "I know what hunger looks like. Lived it myself as a boy." The oldest girl, Emma, stepped forward. "Are you the one who brought the books, too?" Cole nodded. "I saw you trying to read at church. Thought you might like some. I read them all twice." Her voice was soft but proud. "Taught Mama some of the words, too." Ruth's face flushed. "I never learned proper—" "My husband could read, but he died before he could teach me much." Nothing wrong with learning at any age. Cole's chest felt tight, full of things he wanted to say but didn't know how. The youngest boy crept closer, holding something behind his back. He pulled out the wooden horse Cole had carved, worn smooth from handling. "Did you make this too?" "I did. It's my favorite thing in the whole world." The boy clutched it to his chest. "I named him Thunder." Cole had to look away, blinking hard. Ruth sent the children outside to play. When the door closed, silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. "Mr. Dawson." "Cole, please." "Cole." She tested the name, gentle. "I can't repay you. I don't have anything to give. I'm not asking for repayment." He took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would change everything. "I have a ranch, empty rooms, full barns, land that needs laughter and a table too big for one man. I'm asking hoping you and the children might consider making it home." Ruth's eyes went wide. "I don't understand." "I'm asking you to come live at the ranch, not as charity, as family." The words tumbled out faster now. I know this is sudden. I know we barely know each other. But these past weeks, helping you. It's made me realize how empty my life has been. And I hope maybe we could fill that emptiness together. You mean as your housekeeper? No. Cole met her eyes straight. I mean as my wife. If you'll have me. Ruth stood abruptly, chair scraping. You can't mean that. You don't know me. I'm poor. I have 3 children. The town already talks. The town always talks. Cole stood too. Let them talk. I know what I'm asking. I know what I'm offering. And I know what I feel. Her voice went sharp. I won't be pitied, Mr. Dawson, and I won't be bought. I'm not buying anything, ma'am. He held his ground. I'm asking. And what I feel isn't pity, it's admiration. You feed your children scraps and make them think it's a feast. You teach them to read by lamplight, though you can barely read yourself. You hold your head high when the whole town judges you for being poor. That's not something to pity. That's something to honor. Ruth's hands trembled. You don't love me. You love the idea of helping. Maybe it started that way. Cole's voice went soft. But it's not that anymore. I think about you when I wake up. I imagine your voice, your laughter. I want to know everything what makes you happy, what you dream about, how you take your coffee. I want those children running through my house. I want to teach that boy to ride. I want to help Emma read every book ever written. He stopped, steadied himself. I want a family, with you, if you'll let it grow into love. Before Ruth could answer, boots stomped on the porch. The door swung open without knocking. Reverend Hayes stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 church board members. Behind them, neighbors gathered Mrs. Hawkins, Mrs. Brennan, old Peterson, a dozen others drawn by the spectacle. Mr. Dawson, the Reverend said, voice tight with disapproval. I think we need to discuss this situation properly. Cole looked at Ruth, at the fear and shame flooding her face, at the children huddled behind her. Then he looked at the crowd of townspeople gathered to judge them. He stepped onto the porch, Ruth moving beside him without him asking. Discuss what? Exactly. Reverend Hayes cleared his throat. Your involvement with Mrs. Winslow has created considerable talk. The board feels, I don't care what the board feels. Cole's voice carried across the gathered crowd. I've been bringing food to this family because they were hungry and I had plenty. Because watching children eat scraps while I sat at a full table would have made me the worst kind of coward. Mrs. Brennan spoke up, voice sharp. It's not proper, a man of your standing. Proper, Cole cut her off. What's proper about a whole town letting a widow and her children starve while we sit in our warm houses and full pantries? Silence fell heavy. I'm not asking your permission, Cole continued. Gentler now. I'm telling you what's going to happen. I've invited Mrs. Winslow and her children to come live at my ranch. I've asked her to marry me, if she'll have me. And anyone with objections can bring them to me directly. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Ruth stood beside him, back straight despite tears streaming down her face. Then Mrs. Brennan, of all people, stepped forward. Her face had gone soft, eyes wet. She stopped, started again. I think it's a fine thing. Mr. Dawson, brave and fine. I'm sorry I spoke against it, old Peterson nodded. Takes courage to do what's right when folks are watching. One by one. Faces in the crowd softened. Not all, some still looked disapproving, judgmental, but enough. The Reverend's stern expression cracked, revealing something gentler beneath. Well, he said slowly, perhaps there are many paths to righteousness, and perhaps love and charity can walk the same road. Ruth's hand found Cole's, her fingers laced through his, trembling but strong. Yes, she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. We accept, gratefully. 3 weeks later, spring had fully arrived. Cole stood on his porch watching Ruth plant a garden outside the kitchen window. She worked the soil with capable hands, pressing seeds into earth that would soon yield vegetables and herbs and flowers. The children helped Emma digging rows, the middle boy carrying water. The youngest mostly getting in the way but trying hard. Deeper, sweet girl. Ruth instructed Emma. Give those carrots room to grow. The house behind Cole rang with changes. Children's laughter echoed through halls that had stood silent for years. Toys littered the floor of what used to be his study. Ruth's dresses hung in the closet beside his shirts, her hairbrush on the dresser next to his shaving kit. Small markers of family, of life shared, of loneliness ended. They'd married quietly 2 weeks prior, just the Reverend and Mrs. Porter as witnesses. No fuss, no celebration, just promises spoken and meant. Ruth wore a simple dress that Mrs. Brennan had altered to fit. The same woman who'd spread gossip now offering genuine kindness. The town had shifted. Not overnight, not all at once, but like ice breaking in spring, gradual, inevitable, complete. People nodded respectfully when the Dawson family passed on the street. Church ladies brought preserves and offered baking advice instead of judgment. Children from town came to play with Ruth's kids, running wild across the ranch land. Cole heard footsteps behind him. Ruth climbed onto the porch, dirt on her hands, cheeks flushed from work. The garden's going to be beautiful, she said, settling beside him on the bench he'd built special for her. You're beautiful. The words came easy now. She laughed, swatting his arm. Covered in dirt and sweating, that's real beautiful. I mean it. Cole caught her hand. Dirt and all. I've never seen anything more beautiful than you planting roots in my land, making this place a home. Ruth leaned against his shoulder. Our land, our home. The youngest boy, Samuel, though they called him Sam, came running up the porch steps. The wooden horse clutched in his fist. Papa Cole, watch me make thunder jump. Papa Cole. The name hit him square in the chest every time. Let's see it. Son. Sam made the horse jump over imaginary obstacles, providing sound effects that involved considerable spitting. Ruth smiled, eyes soft. That evening, they gathered for supper around a table that finally felt the right size. Cole had added chairs, built a bench for the children, made space for the family he'd never imagined having. Ruth served chicken and potatoes and fresh bread, abundance replacing scarcity, joy replacing fear. Emma asked the blessing, words careful and sincere. Thank you, God, for Papa Cole, who found us when we were hungry and gave us more than food. Thank you for Mama being happy again. Thank you for thunder and books and this good dinner. Amen. Amen, they echoed. Later, after the children had been tucked into beds and rooms they still couldn't believe were theirs, Cole and Ruth sat on the porch watching stars emerge. I need to tell you something, Ruth said quietly. Something I should have said sooner. Cole waited. Patient. That morning you came to the door. I already knew it was you. What? I'd seen you that first dawn, hiding behind your wagon, watched you place the basket and run like a nervous boy. She smiled at the memory. I knew the whole time. I just didn't know how to thank you without making it awkward. Cole shook his head, amazed. You knew all those weeks. Ruth took his hand. I prayed every night that you'd find the courage to tell me yourself. And when you knocked on my door that morning, standing there with neighbors watching, choosing me over your reputation, that's when I knew you loved me. Not the baskets, not the gifts. That moment of courage, I was terrified. So was I. She leaned closer. But here we are. Here we are. They sat in comfortable silence as the children's voices drifted through open windows, Emma reading to her. Brothers, their laughter bright and easy. Cole thought about the flour sack that had saved his family decades ago, about the nameless person who'd given without asking anything in return, about how that single act of kindness had planted a seed that grew into this moment a lonely rancher, becoming a husband and father, a struggling widow finding home, children who knew hunger now knowing only abundance. I always wanted to be that person, Cole said. "The one who left the flower on our porch all those years ago. I wanted to be someone who gave that kind of help to someone else." Ruth squeezed his hand. You are, but I got more than I gave." His voice went thick with emotion. "I thought I was saving you. Turns out you saved me. Maybe we saved each other." The first stars burned bright above their ranch now, filled with noise and life and love. In the garden outside the kitchen window, seeds rested in dark earth, waiting for warmth and rain to call them toward light. Inside the house, children slept safe and full, and on the porch, two people who'd found each other through baskets and courage and grace sat together watching spring arrive. Sometimes grace came in baskets left on doorsteps, sometimes it came in second chances, and sometimes, if you were blessed beyond measure, it came in the form of love you never knew you were searching for but found anyway, waiting in the spaces between giving and receiving, in the quiet moments when courage outweighed fear, in the gentle truth that the best homes were built not from wood and stone, but from open hearts willing to let others in. The lamp glowed warm in the window, a beacon in the darkness, light spilling out across the land like a promise kept,